Hi everybody, this is Dino from Prehistoric Facts. This is an extra episode. We'll be talking about geology. So this is actually this is basically the major science that actually paleontology kind of belongs to. And so we'll actually go through a brief discussion about, basically brief definition and talk about famous scientists and all that sorts of stuff that are part of geology. First off, geology is actually a science that is actually studying the rocks in the earth. And so you're actually studying Earth's history. And so you're actually looking through, like, basically rocks, different kinds of rocks, and you know what determine what kind of rocks were there, what kind of actually made these rocks, the minerals, all that sorts of stuff. So geology is not just studying just like basic rocks. You're also studying minerals, the physical parts of geology, and even past life. And so your paleontology is part of geology. And so we actually have to go with like other types of science that actually involves geology. So you actually got like geochemistry. So you're actually studying the chemistry parts of the rocks. Geophysics, you're studying the physical parts of geology, folds and mountains, or otherwise faults and dikes, those sorts of stuff. Now I'm not talking about, now I'm not being very offensive here. Dikes is actually is a term in geology. It's a stretch of it's like a long type of tube of rock that it's actually just penetrated through certain layers of rock, and so it's pretty much like a volcanic dike. That's what you would call it. And also you got paleontology, which is studying past life on Earth. You also have mineralogy. You're studying the minerals all the time. There's petrology. It's not studying oil. It's not studying oil or gasoline. This is actually studying minerals in the rocks. And so that is a really good. It's a very interesting form of science in geology. And then you got sedimentology. You're studying sediments. Volcanology. You're studying volcanoes. And then you got planetary geology, which is actually you're studying space rocks, basically like asteroids, comets, even other planets, even satellites of planets, like moons, those sorts of things. Those are actually pretty cool to actually learn about. But anywho, let's actually start about how geology came to be. It all starts with actually a man by the name of James Hutton. James Hutton is actually considered to be the father of geology. And he was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, and so he actually was he actually was pretty much more of like a naturalist, physicist, those sorts of things. But he didn't really understand the parts of rocks that much until later on, and pretty much like in his scientific lifestyle, when he was actually looking through his property, and he see how these rocks are actually kind of see all the rocks and boulders that were all over his property, and he was just kind of like, what on earth actually made this? And so he actually decided to actually study these rocks, and ultimately became the father of geology. And so that's where geology was born. Geology was born in the 1700s, and so that's why you actually have James Hutton is considered to be the father of geology. And then you actually have other scientists that actually were involved in certain things, like Wagner. Wagner is a German scientist, meteorologist, who actually came up with the continental drift. And so that's very important. And but his theory wasn't totally accepted until his hypothesis wasn't totally accepted until the 1960s, is when they actually did sonar images of the sea floor, and then they realized is that Wagner was right. He was right all along. Is that there was these plates, tectonic plates, and so that's where you actually have Wagner's hypothesis being confirmed. And so Wagner is very important in terms of geology, because he actually came up with continental drift. And so he actually came up with the idea is that all the continents were once joined together in a super landmass. But they didn't really name this landmass until they actually figured out is that Wegener was right, and so they named the supercontinent Pangea. But there were supercontinents that actually happened before that, and so before Pangea. So, anywho, geology does actually have very unique properties into science. Because first of all, we will never know all the elements that we actually find in the periodic table, thanks to geology. Because geology is the science that actually determines what minerals will actually have these certain elements that are actually found here on Earth. There are some elements that are actually found in space. You know, we find helium, we find hydrogen in space as well. And so you actually have to realize is that geology is very important. It's a very important science. It's a very important science just because it all blends every single science in the world that we know of today, except for psychology and biology. But even though biology does play an important role in paleontology, it's because we need to look at life today in order to actually figure out what life was like in the past. So geology is actually a study of mine. I love studying geology. I've been picking up rocks since I was probably like I was a real little kid. I was picking up rocks and I was thinking that they were fossils, but they weren't really. I never found any fossils when I was a kid, so I just collected a bunch of rocks that were like on Lake Michigan, or otherwise right near the Wisconsin River. And so that's because I'm from Wisconsin. So. But I would like to go down to the shores of Lake Michigan at some point, maybe either in Green Bay or otherwise maybe down near any part of the coast of the eastern coast of Wisconsin, and see if I can find any fossils there as well. Because I've been to western Wisconsin. Western Wisconsin's got like all sorts of fossils, mainly the Ordovician stuff, but. I think western Wisconsin's got more of the Silurian and the Devonian types of rocks. And so, even though they still have Ordovician rocks as well, Cambrian rocks are kind of rare here in Wisconsin, but even though they're actually been found and so on and so forth. But anywho, I gave you a brief definition of geology. I'm not going to get to everything about geology, it's because you see, I want you guys to actually understand about certain things. And so, before I actually take off from this episode, I'm actually going to show you something here, and it's going to be mainly on my phone here. So let me actually show you this. Sorry, it's actually hard here, but what I'm trying to show you is the rock cycle. And so the rock cycle is pretty much the teaching point of geology. So you kind of start with igneous rocks, which are volcanic rocks. Volcanic rocks like granite, basalt, you know, those types of rocks. And then after that, you actually have the erosion takes place, weathering. You get all these types of sediments, and then all of a sudden these sediments start compacting together, creating sedimentary rocks. And so your sedimentary rocks, like you got sandstone, limestone, siltstone, and all those types of very soft rocks. That's what sedimentary rocks are. And then all of a sudden, if you actually have either igneous or sedimentary rocks just buried down in the earth, and then you have pressure and add heat with it, and then and that changes that type of rock, and it has that chemistry of that mineral, and then all of a sudden that rock starts pushing up to the surface. You get your metamorphic rocks. Now metamorphic rocks are kind of like a quartzite, gneiss, you know, those types of rocks where you actually have and even schist. Schist is a metamorphic rock, and so that's where you actually have the change of a rock, and then all of a sudden it goes right back to the same exact thing. And so a metamorphic rock can actually get weathered into sediments, or otherwise it can actually go right towards magma and get melted, and all of a sudden just become magma all over again. And then you actually have that cooling take place all over again. The magma cools, and you actually get your igneous rocks all over again. But sedimentary rocks will actually continue to actually erode all the time and create more sedimentary rocks as well. So that's how you actually got your rock cycle. But anywho, that's it for this week's extra episode. So I'm gonna do this special episode right after this. So I'll get you guys updated on what kind of dinosaur or prehistoric animal I'm gonna talk about, and then we'll go from there. And so but next week there will be a new answering questions episode of Prehistoric Facts. So if you've got any questions about dinosaurs or any other prehistoric life, feel free to email me at dinochrist71@gmail.com, or just go to my Facebook page, Prehistoric Facts with Dino Chris. Like the page, you can actually post your questions in the comments section or even on the wall. Just remember to keep your questions short to the point. You could also follow me on Twitter at CSGRILL. That's my Twitter page. I post pretty cool stuff on there. Take care of the people around you, and also for younger people out there, to make sure to listen to your parents, teachers, and guardians. It's the best motivation you can have for good education. It's very important to have a good education. Good education is with a good education. You get a good job in the future. All right, that's it for now, and I'll see you guys in a little bit.